Committee for Monday, April 8th, 2019. Our first order of business tonight is approval of the agenda. I would like to possibly look at moving the agenda around a little bit and moving our information item up ahead of the non-consent items. And that's because we've got some people from Minnesota United here to talk or to listen to our presentation about the services at that field. And so I think it would be good to move that up in the agenda. So if anyone has any other comments or additions, changes? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion with the amendments to approve it.
Is there a second? Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the agenda is approved. Next, we move on to approval of the minutes from the March 25th, 2019 Transportation Committee. Does anyone have any changes or additions to the minutes? Now I'll entertain a motion to approve minutes.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and we approve the minutes. Next, we move on to our reports. We start with MTS Director Thompson.
Madam Chair and members, I will give Peter Dugan a heads up that I'm going to introduce him in a minute for a brief discussion about his role on TAB and on this committee. A couple updates. This Wednesday, we'll be giving the full council an Metro Mobility 101 overview of that service. And if you have time after the committee, we will have a Metro Mobility bus parked out front so we can give you a kind of a hands-on look of what the customer experience is. And the bus will be out there for a while after the meeting ends. Also on Wednesday, we'll be giving the same presentation at the House at a committee, a presentation about a lot of new members and some questions about the service. So just to let you know that we're giving the same presentation. They'll see it first because they scheduled it earlier in the day, but that's a good overview of the program. With that, also in the daily report, I point to one upcoming meeting on April 24th. That is one of our two Metro Mobility customer convenings. This is the spring convening that we're having at 10 a.m. in Bloomington. What this is we invite Metro Mobility customers to come in and maybe their providers to come in, and we sit around the table and listen to their concerns about the service and take input from them. And it's a great opportunity, if you have time, to just listen to the customers and how they experience it. We usually give a general couple updates on Metro Mobility, but really it's just a time to listen, and we get on average 75 to 100 customers at that service. The spring one is usually during the day, and then the fall one we have in the evening, usually in Minneapolis or St. Paul, so to try to give it different opportunities for the customers to attend. So that's on April 24th. If you have time and can make that, or maybe just put it on your placeholder for the fall, I think it's a good way to understand the service and how it impacts the customers. At the legislature last week, the House introduced the transportation bill that included a lot of the items in the governor's proposal with some extras, and that's going through committees. And either it has been introduced or it's about to. The Senate version of the transportation bill is expected to be released today, with hearings started tomorrow. So a lot of action on the different transportation bills. Of course, they're very different, expected to be very different between the Senate and House versions, so we'll be watching that closely. With that, I'll turn it over and introduce Peter Dugan. He's the TAB liaison to this committee, and usually last time I gave the update on what TAB was doing because Peter was out of town, but I thought I'd give Peter a chance to just talk and introduce himself because you'll see him on this committee, and I think this is the first time since you've all been on this committee that he's been here. So I'll turn it over to Peter.
Thank you. I'm going to stand for the first part. Madam Chair of the Council is here, so I owe you that respect, and you members of the committee. Madam Chair, Madam Chair, the Madam Chair. Madam Chair, General Manager Koistra, and Director Thompson, of course, welcome to the Honorable Committee members. Congratulations on your appointment. It's quite an honor, and I look forward to serving you. Just so you know, so everything's on the table, I'm on a 2-year appointment, and I'm up for reappointment this year, so I may be here in a month, I may not be, so in any event. I am the citizen representative from District H, which generally is Dakota County, and Councilmember Stern's district is 15, and Councilmember Wolf's district is 16. And with the concurrence of the chair, Director Thompson, and Joe Barbeau, Steve Peterson, and Elaine Kousoukalis of the TAB, or the Metropolitan Transportation Services, and the TAB coordinator, we thought it may be helpful each session to do a 1 or 2 minute overview of some aspect of the TAB, since it is a little bit unique. And the folks that I mentioned give truth to the adage that they've forgotten more than I'll ever know. So they're the ones you want to really listen to. As you know, the Met Council is a designated MPO for the 7-county area, and it is charged with continuing cooperative and comprehensive transportation planning. And as you also, I'm sure you know, it's the only transportation management area in Minnesota because of the 200,000 people that you represent. In the transportation planning process, the TAB and its TAC, which is the Technical Advisory Committee, which is comprised of engineers and technical staffers from the various counties, along with your concurrence, is the certified MPO under federal regulations. And it's through the TAB that federal transportation funds are allocated through the process of regional solicitation. The TAB, again, I'm sure you know or recognize, it is unique in that it has federal funding responsibilities through the regional solicitation. It also does a formal review of the transportation policy plan, and it comments on MnDOT, PCA, and MAC documents as a part of the regional transportation policy. The TAB has 34 members, each appointed by the commissioners of Transportation, PCA, Airports Commission, and then the Commissioner of Transportation for non-motorized transportation and freight. It has 2 members from the public transit sector representing public transit, 10 elected public officials appointed from the Association of Metro Cities, and they represent the cities of the first class, and then 1 each from the 7 counties represented by the Met Council, 8 citizens, of which I am 1 suburban transit, and 1, Metropolitan Council member, Chair Barber. There are a couple primary documents, and in this I will conclude. The first one is the Transportation Planning and Programming Guide. It was originally done, or most recently done, in November of 2013, and is being updated as we speak. The second document is the Memorandum of Understanding between MnDOT and Metro Transit and the Council and the TAB as to how they operate. It's a federal requirement, reviewed every 4 years. Next is the Transportation Policy Guide, the TPP, which is the Guide to Regional Transportation. It's a 4-year federal requirement. It is 1 chapter of the TPP, of the Transportation Planning and Programming Guide, and it involves a regional approach to transportation investment for the next 20 years. The third document is the United Planning Work Program, UPWP, again, federally required documentation related to transportation planning activities only, and it is the application to the US DOT for our planning funds. The next is the regional solicitation, which we'll talk about more in depth later on, and the last is the, the TIP, which again is 4 years of multimodal highway transportation, bike, ped, and transit enhancement projects over the 7-county area, federal requirement, and it is considered the short-range planning document and is worked on in connection with MnDOT. That is it. Thank you very much, committee, Madam Chair, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, that concludes my remarks. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from committee members? Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are all terms 2 years?
For which,
The TAB members?
I think Mr. Thompson.
Madam Chair, it staggers the 2-year terms, but then there's some staggering of when they're appointed. The counties reappoint every year.
Okay.
But a lot of the counties have kept the same member for a long time. And then the citizen reps are 2 years, and the modal reps are 2. But we stagger when they're appointed. So we're trying to have some continuity as there's turnover.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, you'll very much enjoy working with Mr. Dugan. He provides great reports here, and so definitely reach out. I'm sure he's been a great, I think, asset in presenting information on to us from the tab. Just to comment on the Metmo forums, the customer forums. If you get a chance to attend one of them, again, that's a great because you actually, it's very interactive. You're out sitting around tables talking to customers and the providers, and you can learn a lot. So it's a really good one. So if we're done there, we'll move over to General Manager Questra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll mention a couple of items here that, first of all, the City of Minneapolis plans to rebuild Hennepin Avenue between Washington Avenue and 12th Street. This is a major project that's supposed to last, I believe, 4 years, last I heard. Bus routes that operate on Hennepin will be detoured to Nicollet Mall beginning Monday, April 15th, so very soon. During the detour, there will be nearly 1,300 bus trips each day on Nicollet Mall. That's almost twice as many trips as Nicollet Mall experiences today. And of course, to speed up boardings, customers will be encouraged to use go-to cards or mobile apps, but this is a big change. Nicollet Mall was seen as the best alternative because it has new waiting shelters with heat, real-time signs, and is close to destinations and transfer points that folks using the Hennepin Avenue are acquainted with. When finished, Hennepin Avenue will have protected bikeways in each direction, 8 enhanced station areas with shelters, real-time signs, heat, light, and security features. More information is available on our website, but I'm mentioning it today because it's a big change and it's a big project for the city and a big change for transit during that 4-year period. Also mentioned that the rail rodeo, our own rail rodeo, is scheduled to occur on Sunday, April 20. Council members who would like to learn more about rail operations are certainly invited to attend. The rail rodeo is a competition for train operators who complete a series of tests and are judged on their operating skills and knowledge. This is, of course, we have bus rodeos where they go through pylons and tests of skill. I was guaranteed this is about a test of whether they can stay on the tracks or not. We know that, but it's more of a test of some of the technical areas of training that they receive, what to do with certain warnings, what to do with under certain situations that are primarily initiated through technology, and so it's a different kind of rodeo than a bus rodeo. But speaking of bus rodeos, we were just recently contacted by APTA to see if would we be interested in holding the mobility conference. This used to be referred to as the bus conference in 2021. And at the same time, they will be having the International Bus Rodeo at the location of the host. And so we're planning to host that. That's a ways out, but we're really excited about it. It's a big deal. It's an international bus rodeo. People come from Canada, I'm told from Puerto Rico and other places to compete. And if you haven't, for these council members here who haven't seen a bus rodeo, it's pretty cool. So we'll have our own bus rodeo for Met Transit, and at that time we'll invite you to that program as well. Then I also lastly want to mention, a couple other things. Operating hiring. We've made some progress. I believe most recent numbers are that we're 36 operators short, bus operators. At one time, I believe we were between 110 and 120 operators short. I think the best we've been recently is 8 operators short. We're hosting several events in communities to allow potential applicants to learn more about the job. We've done a lot of non-traditional marketing and non-traditional community meetings about trying to attract potential interested bus drivers. We offer application assistance. We've broken down the whole process so we don't lose as many of the applicants during the training and during the testing and so forth. We've even have the licensed testers come to our location to do the testing with the people that we're training and the people that are applicants and going through the application process. Probably worth a presentation to this committee sometime in the future about what we are doing with both recruiting and the processing of bus operator applications and bus operator training. Lastly, I want to mention that we had a successful Saturday for the Final Four. It was a big deal. I don't know if we have final numbers, but they were estimating that 16,000 uh, 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 people used light rail post game, and it's a fairly narrow definition. To give you some sense of size, that is that the typical Viking game is about 12,000 people. Maybe a Packer game, they told me, might be 14,000 people. So this was one of the larger post game ridership numbers that we've seen. Uh, uh, we had people moving to Government Center to get on the train because they didn't want to wait in line at the stadium. But with that many users, we had, I believe, the platforms were cleared in about an hour and a half, longer than a typical football game, but given the size and the numbers, it's pretty good performance. That's it. I'm open to questions.
Any questions for General Manager Koistra? I've got a couple of quick ones. So first one is with the operator application process. Really glad to hear that because that is something we heard a lot about at Transit Driver Appreciation Day over the years. And so I think that will be good to have a report back here. The next one you may not have an answer for right away, but it might be something to look into. So when we had to shift ridership from Nicollet over to Hennepin a few years, it affected our ridership downtown. And now if we're doing something backwards, it might be something good to report back to the committee at some point during the construction on what impact there might be to ridership.
Madam Chair, we'll do both of them.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So our next order of business is our consent agenda. We have 5 items on consent tonight. Anyone care to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the consent agenda passes. So now we are moving on to our information items. So we have the Allianz Field Operations. We have Brian Funk here from Metro Transit. And I do want to mention we've got a couple of people from Minnesota United in the front row. If Nord, if you want to introduce them.
Madam Chair, thank you, and great to be here, sitting in with the committee. We have a couple of visitors today, and they are the Maureen Smith, if you want to wave your hand, Vice President of Minnesota United, Joel Carlson, who's also with the team. Appreciate you being here, and I just want to also congratulate General Manager Wes Koistra on a successful Final Four on Saturday. We know tonight's going to be successful, right?
Absolutely.
And now we're turning all eyes on the next prize, which will be a Saturday's game of Allianz with maybe a little bit of snow, right? So no, we're excited to hear out the plans and hear how this is going to roll out because this is a big deal for all of us.
All right, Madam Chair, council members, my name again is Brian Funk. I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer for the bus system. I'll be talking about both modes today, however, but trying to keep it simple and straightforward. And so it's really a pleasure to be here. And I think if there's anything that you're going to learn, or maybe you've picked it up already about Metro Transit, is that there's always something really exciting going on. As soon as one mission is accomplished, we move on to the next, but we're planning all along the way. And so this is a process that's been coming together for years. As you may or may not know, the stadium project itself has had involvement from the council all the way from the beginning. Also in the audience today, Lucy Galbraith is our TOD director. For a large portion of the property is the old Snelling bus garage and streetcar garage. So there's a lot of history of Metro Transit at that site. We've been at the table with our partners, part of that team from both the City of St. Paul as well as Minnesota United, as this transportation management plan has been developed. It's been a labor of love to work together on how to fit together all of the pieces. We knew from the very beginning that because of constraints along this site, that parking, would be tough to come by. There aren't going to be giant ramps. There aren't huge surface lots, and so it required a lot of planning, a lot of smart people to get together and figure out how this could be accomplished using transit for up to as much as about 38 to 40% of the mode split, which is the most of any of the stadiums in the Twin Cities area. And we're up to the challenge. And so today I'm going to walk you through how we're going to go ahead and do that with a plan that both meets the needs of passengers safely and efficiently. Here's a little bit of background information. The first game, inaugural game at Allianz Field is this coming Saturday, 4 p.m. New York is in town, and we're really excited. And so regardless of the weather, we're going to be ready to go. We'll be have clean trains, clean platforms, happy ambassadors who are going to be out there to greet customers and make sure that things go smoothly along with our operations group. This season is shaping up to be at least 17 Minnesota United games, hopefully some more with playoffs, right? Including 8 Saturdays, 5 Sundays, and 4 Wednesday nights. Each one is a little bit different, but one of the really nice things is that for everybody coming to the games during each of these time frames, we have at least 10-minute service on the Green Line and on the A line, so that fast, frequent service, people don't need to check a schedule and plan when to go. They can just go. And we'll talk a little bit more about post-game as we continue here. State Fair is a really busy time in St. Paul, in the Twin Cities. This year there are no home games scheduled during the State Fair. And so as the schedule was announced and that was put out, that was one of the first things us operations people said is, what about that window of the State Fair? We would have done it anyhow, but this is good for the first season. And finally, a few other events, including a couple of events that have already happened, including Meet Your Seat and a community open house. And then June 18th, there's a Gold Cup soccer game that isn't listed here. And then Tommy's and Johnny's are playing a football game in October. So some other events, but it gives you a flavor of what some of the events are that are being drawn into the city here. Here's a list sort of broken out by functional area of how every kind of facet of Metro Transit is going to be responding and pitching in. From the police side, we're primarily serving as public safety and emergency management. St. Paul Police is the lead agency as it relates to traffic management in the area. However, we've been at the table, joined at the hip. We'll be out there in the field, partnered up, so that as we're ensuring that our patrons, our bus and train customers are finding their way to each of the stations, coming and going, it's done in a safe manner, crossing Snelling and University, both of which are major arterial roadways. So this is something that requires great boots on the ground communication, and that partnership is strong. We'll be conducting fare inspections. We're going to do a lot of focus, as you'll hear me talk about, related to our all-day pass. That's one of the things that makes it slow going and can really change somebody's experience if they have to wait in line to buy a ticket. And so starting already, but continuing through the first game and for the rest of the season, our message is to get that all-day pass before you even leave your house. Your phone can be your ticket to riding the train in both directions. And then there's absolutely nothing for you to worry about as a fan and as a rider of Metro Transit. I already mentioned the pedestrian crossing control, and in a second I'll show you a few maps where it shows sort of the navigation to and from the site. Rail operations, our goal is to safely manage the Green Line movements, and one of the things that we're looking at and we'll be prepared for is additional train service. As the general manager mentioned, we had a large number of fans on Saturday night, like we do at other U.S. Bank events. In order to do that, we don't have the regular capacity with the equipment that's just scheduled to be out on the tracks, or in the bus's case, out on the street. And so in the case of the Final Four, we had about 8 extra 3-car trains that were operating. It's a lot of capacity, a lot of train movements through the platform. In the case here, we're going to have 4 that are ready to go so that we can be watching that, be able to send them in either direction in between the 10-minute service. Now, when you take into account that loading customers, allowing them to get onto a platform takes several minutes, getting them on a train takes several minutes, you can only squeeze so many trains in there safely without kind of forcing something that then people are starting to feel rushed and hurried. And so we think that's the right number to be able to do this in between those 10-minute service. And the really nice thing, especially when we send extra trains going in the eastbound direction towards downtown St. Paul, those trains will get over here to this side of town in about 18 minutes. They'll be able to turn around return back towards the stadium site to be able to do a trip westbound if they're needed at that time. So it'll work out really well. We're confident that that's a good plan for the additional rail capacity we're going to be seeking. And of course, we'll have ambassadors both helping people find the right queuing locations as well as on the platform to make sure people are safely getting on and off those trains. As far as bus operations go, we're primarily using the A line, the north and south on Snelling service. Fortunately, we have two stations, both on the south side of the University Avenue intersection, which you'll see on the map here momentarily, and we're adding extra service for the A line as well. That's going to do two things for us. We have 5 articulated buses that will be going in both directions. So as soon as a regular scheduled bus pulls up, it's able to load the capacity. We pull up an extra. If we have time, pull up another extra. And really what that does, whatever lines start to form, keeps folks moving. They always see that there's a bus there. We can get them going. And same as what I mentioned with Green Line, buses going northbound, when they get to Rosedale, we'll call in, find out, do we need them to come back? And if so, which direction, so we can make use of a bus for multiple trips if that's necessary. In addition, on University Avenue, 5 of the buses will be staged facing eastbound between Snelling and Fry. They'll serve as a physical barrier from the sidewalk so that people who might have ideas about looking at that Green Line station don't make a break for it across the tracks. That sort of traffic control is really important to all of the partners involved, and having a physical separation like those buses that are staged works really well. It's been used time and time again, including at US Bank Stadium whenever we run extras for Vikings games. And finally, as I mentioned, ambassadors. These are employees who come out. They help our customers with wayfinding, queuing, and customer assistance, answering questions, making sure people know what the proper fare is, how to go about doing that. And they're out there for both pregame and postgame. High visibility, they're seeking people that they want to help. We just want that experience to be really strong. So if we look here at the pre-event bus and light rail operations, so to orient you, I-94 is down on the south end here, and of course we have University Avenue and Snelling Avenue with Allianz Field down in the corner here. And when customers are coming to the event, some are going to come southbound on A-line. They're going to get dropped off right at this station here. Then they will cross over through the gate at Spruce Tree. Really nice and controlled. We got to keep people moving because anytime we stop traffic on Snelling, you stop traffic on Snelling, and so it needs to be a well-oiled machine. At the same time, folks who are getting off westbound trains up at the Snelling Avenue Green Line station, there's going to be some crossing allowed here. However, we're going to be encouraging folks to make the trip to Fry and come around and cross at Spruce Tree. That's something that we've been working with St. Paul Police about. It's going to be a learning process as we go because it's not intuitive, but it's certainly the safest, most efficient way to go about doing it. And then for eastbound and northbound customers, they're already on the correct side of Snelling when they exit. And so for eastbound customers, there's a walkway and a crosswalk that brings you across near Simpson into the stadium site. And then northbound buses drop right outside the stadium, essentially. So we think we're sited well. We have a good plan for getting people safely across the intersections. Post-event light rail operations, if you follow the sort of teal or blue arrows, fans will be coming out of the stadium from a couple different directions, but primarily if you're going back towards the train, you're going to exit to the north, and you're going to see wayfinding and ambassadors sort of in this area. We're going to help you to get up and across Snelling Avenue through a gate. So right now, if you're not familiar, on Snelling and the median is a fence. However, there's a gate that can be opened on game days by St. Paul Police so that they have that staff. We're able to coordinate when traffic stops, safely cross everyone to the other side of the street, and then follow the sidewalk along up to Fry. And there's a walkway that's built into the station where we'll be able to load at least one train full of folks here, and then additional train loads here, and to safely get them across the street without having to get anywhere near sort of that Snelling and University corner, which is one of the goals. It's a little bit different for folks going back to St. Paul. folks will come out of the stadium from a variety of locations. They'll come up essentially what has been Simpson, sort of behind where McDonald's and the liquor store are. There's a pedestrian crossing that's well marked, and we'll be crossing folks onto, again, a walkway that's already in existence up to the platform, so we're able to pre-populate the platform. So when a train comes in, there's a group of people ready to go, but then we also have other people who are already on the correct side of the street who are able to go next. So. And then bus operations is similar, a little more straightforward. So the key to all of this is that customers who are arriving are going to be greeted by somebody who says, all right, when you leave, you don't come back to this exact spot. We have what we call buck slips, handouts, so that people have a site map of the entire location and they know, all right, when I came to the event, I got dropped off on this side of the street southbound. Well, when I go home, I just need to go northbound. So I don't need to cross the street again, but I need to know that beforehand. Otherwise, I cross the street, figure out I'm at the wrong place. I got to come back. And we're trying to ingrain from the get-go where you go in both, when you're coming and when you're leaving. Southbound is similar to folks who are going to a westbound Green Line station where they'll be lined up. They'll come across at Spruce Tree. And on this side of Spruce Tree, we have sort of a Disneyland-style serpentine set up so that we can, have enough room for people to be safely across the street and ready to go. All right. And finally, how are we communicating this? So we do have a website, metrotransit.org/Allianz-field that answers all the questions, has maps, has links to be able to buy passes. We also have a Know Before You Go joint press conference that's being arranged for this Wednesday in 2 days. Our partners from the team, the city, and MnDOT will all be participating, so we can use that, establish some footage that can be run on both news stations as well as all of our media contacts and outlets. I've mentioned our ambassador staff of folks who are out there wanting to help, as well as the distribution of buck slips, site maps, wayfinding signage. The real big key that we're going to be stressing at every opportunity, and TIC on this slide stands for our Transit Information Center. Anytime somebody calls in to ask about going to a United game, going to Allianz Field, they say the word soccer, we talk about the all-day pass. We say, this is what you should be doing when you buy your ticket. Even if you have a go-to card with stored value today, you can select that on the validator, get your all-day pass so that you don't have to mess with it at all after that initial ride. We're really excited about that. That's going to speed up the process for everybody, and we're including it pretty much at every turn. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Madam Chair.
Madam Chair. Mr. Funk, I know it's not necessarily our part of this, but the shuttles, how does that interact?
Yeah, it's a great question, Madam Chair, council members. There is a shuttle service that has been arranged by the team, and so that's sort of for fans who want to have a tailgating experience, departing from the State Fairgrounds area. Won't be coming down Snelling. It's going to go just a little bit off, which is good, and it'll be loading and unloading sort of in the, I think I can show about where it is on the stadium footprint, sort of in this area. And so that we know and we're expecting that there's going to be questions about, well, I took the bus here, I need to go to the fairgrounds. And while northbound A-line certainly can get folks up to Como right by the fairgrounds, we'll help to make sure that it's clear on which type of bus people took. But we think that'll be a nice sort of alternative or offering, and I think it's an evaluation to determine what that demand is and how it all comes together.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Mr. Funk, those I've been in that area, and is the fencing up all the way around the perimeter there still?
So Madam Chair, I'm looking at the audience member, but no, I'm seeing that fencing is down, and so I was gonna go through there on my way back to Minneapolis tonight, but just to kind of get eyes on it, and I know that there's staff meeting that's happening Thursday morning for kind of that final walkthrough with all of our operations and ambassador folks from each of the partner organizations.
So that leaves a lot more room, right, for people to walk, because if people are walking with groups or families or those types of things, I think that makes a lot of sense. And so I just want to say thanks for the presentation. It's really, really helpful to see it and to see exactly what's going to happen. I don't know about all of you and new council members. I mean, this is my sort of first couple of events, right, as the chair, and it is amazing to see the planning, and we look forward to a good event, and I know the weather's going to be fantastic. So I just want to make sure. Anybody else?
All right, any other questions? Councilmember Ferguson.
Two questions, Madam Chair, if I can. One is, it sounds like on the 28th of April, there won't be any parking at the State Fairgrounds. So do we have an adjusted plan for the 28th of April?
Madam Chair, Council Member, April 28th wasn't quite on my radar yet, but I got it written down, and so we can make that adjustment, work with the team on sort of what our contingency plans in that regard are and how we message it to customers in advance.
Okay. And Madam Chair, my second question is, we talk to the businesses in the area so their bathrooms and other things don't get overrun by people that are waiting for transit or et cetera, like the Spruce Tree Building, the McDonald's, the others in the area.
Madam Chair, Council Member, that's something I will need to go take back and coordinate with both the efforts that we've made to do that sort of outreach and make sure people know what to expect on game day from our perspective, as well as sort of that holistic view. And as I understand it, there was a neighborhood open house where maybe some of those issues were addressed, but specific to your question, I can get an answer and bring it back.
And if you need help connecting with them, we can definitely help.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Cummings.
Madam Chair, similar question. I'm curious, can you give us a little background on the outreach and input that you received from residents in the neighborhood and the ongoing conversation and communication that you intend to, I'm sure, have? By the way, what a wonderful presentation, and clearly you have really thought this through and considered it from every angle. So I'm just curious what people who live over there might expect and how we might continue to interact with them.
Right, Madam Chair and Council Members. So we had two sort of open houses for the neighborhood where we went, presented our plan alongside St. Paul Police and St. Paul Transportation in the last couple of weeks. So we were able to bring forward a presentation similar to this with even a few more details and some more Google Maps about what are the specifics and where our posts going to be and signs, so that we're able to hear from the neighbors. And certainly, there's concern about, where are people going to park and how much is traffic going to be impacted. From the Metro Transit perspective, we're looking at this really as an opportunity to promote our service and say, whatever we can do to do a really good job and drive more people to the trains and buses, the better it's going to be for the neighborhood. The sooner that we're able to move through and then transport away from the area, the sooner it's back to the normal that folks are able to experience. And so I'm unaware of any sort of concerns or real major issues that Metro Transit needs to be aware of going into this. However, we do fully intend to be a good neighbor. Snelling is one of our busiest stops on a daily basis for both Green Line and for the A Line. And so we're always a presence in the community, and we need to be good partners, whether it's special event day or not.
Thank you.
Any other questions? None? Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing how wonderful it goes and how wonderful the team does. So thank you very much. All right, next we are on to our non-consent items. Our first item is item 2019-55, which is a joint item week. It's a 2019 budget amendment. We have Ed Petrie and Heather Augustin Hubner here. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. I'm Ed Petrie. I'm Director of Finance with Metro Transit.
And Heather Augustin Hubner, Director of Finance with MTS.
We're here to present the first quarter capital and operating budget amendment. One of the things that we thought we would do first is we would just quickly go through a quick overview of our kind of process that we will come forward to the council and the committee members throughout the year, kind of explain to you the process, how we do it, the amendment process, and just give you a little tutorial before we actually go into the business item. So first of all, with our annual timeline, uh, back in December, the council adopted the 2019 operating budget and the 2019 capital budget and the 6-year CIP plan. As we're moving throughout the year, then we will then bring forward, Heather and I will see you, or you'll see us on a quarterly basis. We will come forward. We've already done the carry forward amendment. That's normally done like the February timeline. Then we will then follow that with 3 quarterly amendments throughout the year, bringing forward changes either to operating, bringing forward changes to capital programs. We'll get into a little more detail, but all those types of changes, and we bring it forward to the council with recommendation as things are changing. One of the things I do want to stress, so this is part of our normal cycle. Basically, every quarter, like I said, you will see us. We'll bring forward changes either on the capital side or on the operating side. There is one point, though, that is for high priority or time-sensitive items. If there's a major change in a program, let's say like one of our New Starts programs, and we get a full funding grant agreement, for example, or if we have a major contract that's ready to expire, we need to purchase buses or something like that, we may bring something in. Heather or I may bring something forward to the council on an off-cycle basis if it's time-sensitive and that we cannot wait until the next amendment process to occur. That's not very frequent, but it does occur every once in a while, a couple times throughout the year. But one of the things, like I mentioned, though, our process here is basically it's normal process. You will see us every quarter. The types of amendments that we do both operating and on the capital side. On the operating, we'll bring in items that are mainly changes in revenues or changes in expense assumptions. For example, the changes in the revenues I'm referring to could be changes like in our passenger fares, passenger revenues. On the expenses, it could be changes in fuel, parts. If we have a major program, for example, like Metro Mobility that has a major change in utilization, we may have to bring forward an expense authorization, expense adjustment for that. We will also bring in on the operating side if there's any type of new program initiative, if we've received some special funding, for example, from the counties. If there's a special program that we're doing, maybe like on the blue line or the green line, something like that, we get some special compensation from the counties, we would bring those types of funding in. Final bullet point in operating, if there's any changes from the legislature. As you're aware, we're going through right now our operating cycle at the legislature. If we happen to have any changes, for example, in our state appropriations, which historically has happened to us, where we'll have, like, for example, right now our base for state appropriations is $89 million. We may come back with a change that they may adjust, let's say $10 million a year. I'm just throwing a number out there, but if they make those types of adjustments, we will then have to reflect those adjustments in the operating budget. So then Heather or I would then come back after the legislature is done and make those changes in our operating budget. On the capital side, the first bullet point is moving projects from the capital improvement program or the CIP into our authorized capital program. So basically what the council adopts when you adopt the budget in December, you're adopting our 2019 capital budget and then our 6-year CIP. As funding becomes available, for example, as we get the federal grants in or the regional transit capital, county money, whatever the case would be, as the money becomes available for those projects that are in the CIP, which is the plan, we will then bring forward those projects and inform the council, project XYZ, whatever the case would be, park and ride, for example. We had planned that in the CIP. We now have the federal grant available. We now recommend bring that from the CIP into our authorized capital plan so that we can begin spending. We will never bring anything, though, from the CIP into the authorized capital program until the money is available, because that's one of the codes thing that we cannot do that until money is available to spend. Some of the adjustments we'll bring forward on the capital side, as I mentioned, could be project adjustments. If the scope of a project changes, we would bring that forward. New projects, or closing projects, or if there's some administrative adjustments. And as we go through the capital amendment this evening, there are some of those types of adjustments that we will talk about as we go through those items.
Okay, so Ed walked through most of the list of kind of our customary amendments, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. What I will do is I'm going to talk a little bit. There are times when we have some sources on the operating side and some on the capital side, and we always have to evaluate the projects and make sure that we have the appropriate and eligible funding source. with the correct type of projects. So there will be some times where you're going to be seeing us move dollar for dollar money from the operating to the capital program. I'll walk through an example with you when we get to the actual MTS budget amendment tonight. Our capital budget is broken out into major categories we call parents. Think of these as major categories. It's going to be things like technology or bus buys or transit ways. Underneath that, we have specific projects. Think of them as children, that we're going to have individual projects in each of those parents. The council, what we ask you for is to approve at the parent level. And then at the division level, we have the authority to move funds at the child level. The most common example you're going to see is we may have 5 bus buys in the big bus category. We know one bus buy is going to come in at $10,000 under budget. Another one we anticipate is going to come in at $10,000 over budget. We may shift that money between the two projects. So we're never going to move money into a different category, but we might move money between specific projects in a broader category. Whenever we do this, we call it an administrative adjustment. And whenever we come back quarter by quarter, we'll walk through you what we've done and make sure that we call out anything that has a regional significance or any sort of material dollar amount. And we do that for transparency so you always know what we're doing. Our budget amendments do include projects for both Metropolitan Transportation Services, Metro Transit, and suburban transit providers, and you're going to see examples of all of these projects in tonight's amendment. So we can either pause and answer any immediate questions you have, or we can transition directly into the budget amendment at this time.
Okay, committee members have any questions? All right, let's roll ahead.
Okay, let's get into the fun then. And only finance people would think the numbers were funds. Is somebody bringing? Maybe I guess you do have the information there. Okay, with the amendment item this evening, for example, you will have the information that's broken out between Metro Transit first, on the capital side, and Metropolitan Transportation Services, which is Heather. So we'll go through that information. Then there's I believe an operating one for Metropolitan Transportation Services this evening. As Heather mentioned, as we go through the information, there's basically 3 attachments. Attachment number 1, which is at the parent level, which is at the program level. For example, that'll be like, for example, bus purchases, technology, customer facilities, the major levels. What we're going to discuss with you mainly this evening, though, is the attachment number 3, which is the colored sheet, the multicolored sheet, which is at the child level, which is at the project level. For example, like Heather mentioned, for example, we could have bus purchases, which is the parent, but then under that we could have purchasing D-line buses, purchasing Arctic buses. Those types of items don't fall under the parent down to that child level. That is a level of detail that we'd like to go through with the committee so you understand what the different projects are that we are bringing forward for amendment this evening. The format of the schedule is basically set up. It lists all the different projects down the right hand, or down, I guess that would be left hand side. The first section is what is currently authorized. So it tells you what is currently has been previously authorized by the council. So it tells you current authority. The center section, which is in the pink, then will be what we're recommending for change this evening. It's the proposed change to the currently authorized. Then that brings you to the final column over here on the right-hand side, then, which will then give you the brand new balances. The balances are then broken out by federal funds, state funds, regional transit capital. If there's other funding, for example, county funding, we break it out by color money, because that's one of the things when we track it on the general ledger and track our expenditures, we have to track it by funding source. We also want to inform the council what the funding source is, whether or not it is federal funds, what type of federal money it is, if it's regional transit capital, if it's money we got from Hennepin County, for example, on the southwest side, something like that. We want to inform the council. The final 2 columns on the right-hand side are, one is called the 2019 budget, and one's called the multi-year authorization. So the difference between the 2 of them is the 2019 is how much we plan to spend in calendar year 19. The multi-year will equal the total of the proposed amendment, which means many projects, for example, like an operating is for 1 year. But when you think of a capital project, for example, like the new Minneapolis bus garage, that'll be a construction project that could last over 2.5 years. So what we would bring forward, like for example, this evening, we'll bring forward the amount that we plan to spend in 2019 for the new Minneapolis bus garage, but then in the multi-year, we'll bring in the total amount that we will spend over all years. So, we okay so far on that, or do you have some questions before we move forward?
Councilmember Cummings.
Madam Chair, just so I understand, okay, so the big number that you're gonna spend on the new bus
Multi-year.
depot, the multi-year,
Yes.
includes what you're spending in 19, or it's net of that,
Madam Chair, committee members, the multi-year would include all years.
everything?
Current year and all
And plus,
everything.
okay.
That's correct.
Yep,
It is the
thank you.
whole thing. That's correct. Okay, let's move into the amendment portion for Metro Transit. The top portion for Metro Transit, we have, first of all, what's a category called administrative adjustments. And you will notice the Southwest project, you'll see an adjustment for a minus $7.4 million and a positive $7.4 million. What this adjustment is just something we want to show the council what is happening. If you recall, or maybe you are aware, back in 2017, the County's Transit Improvement Board dissolved. All the financial responsibilities, both operating and capital from the County's Transit Improvement Board, CTIB, went to the respective counties. So what's happening this evening is we had a final grant from CTIB on the Southwest line that is now being assumed by Hennepin County. So we're just showing the minus coming out of $7.54 million represents CTIB, the positive coming back in at $7.4 million, which represents Hennepin County. It's a wash in and out. It does not change the project scope, doesn't change the project budget, but we just want to be very transparent that we're changing the color of money to the council. The next category is in the center section. It's called closing projects or reallocating authorized funding. As part of our normal process, Heather and I we monitor all of our capital projects, and as projects are getting to the end of their life, if we've spent all the money, the project has completed its scope, and if there potentially could be some additional funds left, we will bring those projects back into the council and say, for example, we're closing these projects. We recommend them for closing. The scope of the project has completed. Either we have fully expended the funds, or there's, for example, on this we have Metro Transit, we have $52,000 worth of money that is left that we're going to now close out of that project, bring back into the Metro Transit capital program, and then in the next quarter's amendment, bring that $52,000 back into another project. So basically, we're just showing that we closed it. We had $52,000 left. We're going to take it back and reallocate it back to another project. So the positive is that the council is not losing the money. The positive is that the council will be able to reuse the money into another project. The meat of the adjustment that we have this evening is called authorized new projects. I have a number of projects here that we're bringing forward for some recommended changes. The first two lines is for the next fare and fare collection equipment. This is more of an administrative type adjustment. We have our large project for our device equipment for all of our fare collection equipment on the Metro Transit buses. We're actually going to go through a new program for replacing all of our GFI fare boxes on our buses. So we're actually going to move $2 million out of the device equipment budget down into a new bus budget called fast fare box equipment. It's just something so my finance staff, my grant staff can easily monitor that money as it's being used. So we're just moving it from one fare box into another fare box type project. The next big adjustment is a $3.1 million adjustment on the D line, bringing in funds for final design and for some support staff. One of the things that's a little unusual with this one is the fact is that we have already applied for a federal grant for these types of costs, these types of services on the D line. That federal grant right now was held up in Washington due to the federal shutdown. It's going through its process right now. We should have that executed probably within about the next 30 to 45 days. The issue is what we have this evening is the fact that for the support costs and for the design work on D-Line, it needs to keep going. So I'm temporarily recommending an encumbrance of $3.1 million of regional transit capital as an encumbrance for the D-Line so they can continue doing their design work. And then the next capital amendment, when Heather and I come back in, I believe it's in June or July, I'll bring back a reversal of this and bring in the federal funds because they will then be executed through the federal government. So this is just a temporary encumbrance. You'll see this is something unusual. We don't do it very often, But for example, with the shutdown of the federal government, this is something, even though the federal government shuts down, projects keep going. So we have to keep these projects moving. We have two adjustments, one on the Blue Line and one on the Southwest LRT projects. Both of these are adjustments to final subordinate SFA subordinate funding agreements that we have both with MnDOT and Hennepin County. The final agreements have been finalized. We had originally put in estimates. We know what the final agreement is, so now we're suggesting the scope to tie to those final agreements. Another one is for D-Line. Another major one is D-Line North buses. You'll see actually a minus in here of $6 million. What this was is back in, I think it was September, October of 2017, we needed to, once again, encumber money so we could purchase the D-Line buses. The D-Line buses were being paid for with the CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality federal grant. That grant was not available until 2019. That grant has now been available. It's now been executed. Wes has approved that grant, has authorized it. So we had temporarily had to encumber the $6 million of RTC so we could order the buses. The federal grant is in now, so now we're releasing the RTC and bringing the federal money in. So that's what's basically happening with that adjustment. We have another adjustment here for the Haywood expansion, $24.9 million. This is for the construction of the new Minneapolis bus garage. It's a large sum of money. This brings the total project up to the $120 million, which was discussed with the funding plan with the council last fall. With this money, then they plan to then issue the RFP, and we had hoped to hopefully select a vendor sometime during the June, July timeline of 2019. So this will complete the money so we can move forward with that RFP process. The final item is the downtown Minneapolis Hennepin Avenue customer facility improvements. That's for $1.5 million. It's for the Minneapolis Hennepin Avenue downtown reconstruction project from Washington to 12th Street, and it's in conjunction with the city's 2020 reconstruction work. This was once again in the authorized CIP plan. The money is now becoming available. We're bringing it forward. All the adjustments that I'm recommending for action this evening for Metro Transit were in the council's adopted CIP that the council approved in December. As money's becoming available, those types of items, we're now recommending them to move forward. So, Madam Chair, I've been very windy here, but those are the items from Metro Transit. I would stand for any questions, and if not, I will turn it over to Heather.
Any questions for Ed? All right. Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you.
No
I
worries.
just would like to make a comment. This was all new, I think, to all of us. Very helpful.
Great.
Thank you. Very helpful, because the verbiage is interesting, but your explaining it really helps to have it all make sense to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We appreciate that.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to the closed projects, when you mentioned that when there's some money that is left over from closed projects, that the staff will decide how to reallocate those funds? Is that how it's done?
Chair, committee members, maybe I misspoke there. What we're doing here, there's two different buckets here. There's $43,000 that's called state. We have some motor vehicle sales tax money that was in a project, and we have $8,000 worth of RTC money. What will happen with that money is that money will then go back into the buckets of Metro Transit. In a future capital amendment, then we will bring forward to the committee and to the council and say, we previously brought $52,000 back to our program. We now recommend it going to this park and ride project or whatever.
Okay.
But it'll be at the decision of the council where the money goes. We will just bring a recommendation back.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any additional questions for Ed? Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, can you give an example of, can you kind of walk us through the process of when you made a recommendation and maybe one of the committees or the council members had a suggestion on how to use the money if it was reallocated?
Okay, Madam Chair, committee members, first of all, I would say with probably 99.9% of the projects we will bring forward for recommendation would be projects that were in the council's adopted CIP.
Okay.
So they were already projects that the council, like for example in December, said these are projects that we feel have merit. When the funding becomes available, we do recommend that you bring it forward. One of the things that we do also do though is when we bring a project forward, we will also note in the narrative, it'll say this project was in the CIP. If it is not in CIP, we will then bring that forward and say, we're recommending this other project that was not originally in the adopted council CIP, but we recommend bringing it in, and this is the reason why. So, like I said, with 99.9% of the projects that we bring forward would be projects that were in the council's adopted CIP and that was approved for the plan.
Okay.
When money becomes forward or becomes available, we'll bring them in. But if it is a project that was not originally adopted by the council, we would then bring forward with a recommendation, but then explain to you why we're recommending. Then it's up to the council whether or not they want to bring it in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any additional questions for Ed? And I will tell you, Heather and Ed are very good at answering these questions. So if you want more detail, more information offline too, I mean, by all means, get in touch with them because you're very good at describing what we actually do. All right, we'll move on to
We love numbers, so.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Okay. So MTS is closing 13 projects totaling just over $11 million. These projects have been completed and unspent funds will be available for future programming, similar to what we just discussed on the Metro Transit side. We're also requesting to bring in just under $2 million of RTC or Regional Transit Capital Bonds to provide regional support for the expansion of the Apple Valley Transit Station. This project was selected by TAB, or the Transportation Advisory Board, through the regional solicitation, and local funding is being provided by the Council, Dakota County, and the Minnesota Valley Transit Authority, or MVTA. They'll be adding 2 parking decks to the Apple Valley Transit Station, and that serves local express routes and serves the Metro Red Line. On the administrative amendment side, there's a couple items that I did want to call out for you that either because of a high dollar amount or because of regional significance. I break them down into 2 buckets. The first of which is bus buys. So we brought in budget authority in the Q3 budget amendment for we knew we wanted to buy small buses and we knew how much. It was in the CIP. Now we have the specific project. So we were proposing that we buy 55 small buses and related technology for Metro Mobility and 1 for Scott County, and 7 sedans and related technology for Metro Mobility. These are projects that were reviewed by the council, adopted in the CIP, and now we're moving forward with the bus buys. The second category is suburban transit provider projects. The council typically brings in suburban transit, so let me back up. Suburban transit provider show up in our CIP in a couple different ways. The first is we buy all their buses, or 99.9% of their buses. So as you see MTS budget amendments, you're going to see a lot of buses in there for MBTA, for Maple Grove, for Plymouth, and for Prior Lake. That's just going to be a normal part of what you're seeing, and you'll be seeing in all the planning documents and nearly all of the budget amendments. The second place you're going to see them is we have federal earnings. There's federal formula earnings. Metro Transit earns them, MTS services earn them, and so do suburban transit providers. We're the federal pass-through. So what happens is we figure out how much federal money we're going to get. That gets allocated to the suburban transit providers. And then what we do, as soon as we have access to the money, we bring it into our authorized capital program as soon as we possibly can. And we do that so suburban transit providers don't get caught in our budget amendment timelines when they're ready to move forward with projects. So what you're going to see in nearly every budget amendment, or most budget amendments, is you're going to see an administrative adjustment, and it's going to say something to the effect of, we are moving $500,000 from MVTA's undesignated, so that's going to be your code for it's in the ACP and they haven't identified a specific project, to a support facility project, or whatever project they determine they want to do. We don't control how they spend those dollars. What our responsibility is to bring them in to the capital budget. They identify what they want through their own board CIP process, and then we distribute those monies through a grant agreement, and we just make sure, our job there is really to make sure that eligible dollars are spent on eligible type of projects. So on the operating side, MTS is requesting a transfer of just under $1.5 million of federal funds from the MTS capital program to the operating budget, and for an equal amount of operating dollars to be transferred from the operating budget to the capital program. This is going to allow us to do a couple things. One, we want to give suburban transit providers the flexibility. So when we earn federal money, we can spend that on operating and on capital, but we have to do a lot of forward planning in order to identify what those projects are. One of the things that we would like to do for suburban transit providers, and they want us to do for them, is to give them as much flexibility as we can. And sometimes they don't know, and we don't know for that matter, what our projects, if they're going to be operating or capital, far enough in advance for all of the planning. So what we do is when suburban providers come to us and say, hey, we want to do project A, what we do is the first thing we do is we look and we see if that is a capital project and we can use capital sources. If not, what we do is we do a one-for-one dollar push from our operating budget to the capital and from the capital to the operating budget. Motor vehicle sales tax, we don't program in the capital budget, but it is eligible for capital. So what we do is we bring the federal money over, use it in our operating budget, and then push our invest over in order to allow the suburban transit providers to use that on their projects. You're going to see this happen you're going to see it at least once a year in the average year, and you might see it more than once. So if you see this happening, this swap, that is what we're doing. So it allows the suburbans to have more flexibility. It allows us to have administrative efficiencies because it allows us to put bigger pots of federal money into smaller amounts of a really expensive project, and that that really minimizes our paperwork and it reduces the amount of time that we have to spend on grant agreements, and we are always monitoring our programs and the suburban transit provider programs and in our role with the FTA to make sure that all the FTA guidelines are being followed. That's just part of our work, so that all of the requirements are being followed also. So we're really good from a compliance standpoint with the federal government. So that was probably the biggest complicating factor of the budget amendment tonight. I have visual diagrams if that would be helpful, and I'm happy to walk through that with anybody individually or answer any questions you may have here tonight.
All right. Any questions for the presenter? Councilmember Stern.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if this is like, does it a purview, but I just was right by the Apple Valley Transit Station today. So I just was wondering, like, the money for the project where you're talking about the double ramp, but what is that parking lot where there used to be the Menards lot with the weeds growing? Is that owned by Metro Transit currently, or is that not in the purview? And then my second part question is, now we've got both of the MVTA and Metropolitan Transit seem like they share in the station. So I'm kind of wondering, like, who owns what part of that, and how do they share the the project and the money and that type of thing?
Madam Chair, council members, I would be happy to answer that question, and I think that may be better in a one-on-one.
Okay.
And then I can have everything laid out, and certainly I can distribute that to anybody else that may be interested.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then the next step is to actually take action on this and to look for a motion to authorize or approve the 2019 Unified Budget Amendment.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2019 Unified Budget.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're on to our last order of business tonight, which is item 2019-69, which is the 2425 Minnehaha Avenue sale. We have Michael Krantz. Welcome.
Chair, committee members, I'm Michael Krantz. I'm a development analyst with Metro Transit's TOD office, and I'm presenting business item 2019-69, through which the council would declare the property at 2425 Minnehaha excess and sell it to Atlas Gourmet Foods Incorporated for $1.65 million. So this is the location. This site, as I mentioned, is along Minnehaha Avenue in Minneapolis. It's in Council District 8. This is a photo of the building as it exists today. It's actually served as the headquarters for Metro Transit's police department for the past 20 years. Just to provide you a little bit of background, the property was leased from 1994 to 2003. The council acquired it in 2003. construction of the new Metro Transit Police Department headquarters is going to be this summer. In anticipation of that, we completed a facilities analysis to see if there's any future need for the building, and none was identified. Market analysis was also conducted last year, which identified some strong interest in the property. And based on that information, it was decided to move forward with an invitation for bids. Procurement opened those bids in December of last year, and they closed at the end of February. So the council's real estate policy allows property to be sold for market value or below if it advances the council's priorities and objectives. The highest bid for this was slightly below the appraised value. This action advances the TOD policy by integrating jobs and transportation at this location, leveraging private investment, improving multimodal access to job opportunities. It provides revenue to the council, and it also provides property tax revenue. This action also advances the Thrive outcomes. It promotes stewardship by disposing of property that the council no longer needs. No near-term use for the property was identified, so if it isn't sold, it could sit vacant for a few years. The action promotes prosperity by encouraging job creation in Council District 8. And it promotes both prosperity and equity by encouraging economic development in an area with multiple transit connections. So the bus route 9 operates along this corridor, and the site's also within a half mile of a Blue Line LRT station. So the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council declare the real property at 2425 Minnehaha surplus and authorize the regional administrator to quitclaim the property to Outlast Gourmet Foods Incorporated for $1.65 million. And with that, I will take questions.
Thank you. And are there any questions from committee? Councilmember Ferguson.
How many jobs do we expect to be at the site?
Chair, committee members, I actually don't have an estimate of how many jobs the employer plans to put there at this point.
So then how do we evaluate that it will be job creating and that it's a good use of sort of this asset?
Sure. Chair, committee members, we have included some deed restrictions to encourage this as a job-oriented use moving forward. But the procurement was based mostly on was strictly based on the highest bid at this location. That was based on our coordination with procurement and how we could move forward with that.
Councilmember Sterner.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just was wondering, how many bids did you get then? What was the range of the bids? Obviously, this was the highest one, but.
Chair, committee members, so we did receive 2 bids, but my understanding for procurement is that I can't provide the actual values of the bid amounts. I would have to check on that.
That's correct. Yeah, that is correct. Councilmember Cummings?
That was my question.
Any other questions? Councilmember Sterner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was wondering, like, what kind of marketing was done? It looked like it was over a couple months, but it seems like in general, it's a pretty robust real estate market in a growing area, and they had improvements in Minnehaha. It seems like 2 bids is fairly low.
Sure. Chair, committee members, we advertised the property. We actually ran an article in Finance and Commerce and had an advertisement in Finance and Commerce as well. And we also reached out, our real estate appraiser reached out to some of the brokerage community to let them know that the property was going to be available. So those were the avenues that we took. And we also advertised it, obviously, on our procurement website.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
Just have a quick question.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
What type of business is this?
Chair, committee members, my understanding is it's a food manufacturing business.
Manufacturing. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve the proposed action.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion carries. Thank you. All right, we have couple of minor details to take care of. So the first thing is determine if anything can go on consent. Let's say that item 2 can go on consent. For the budget amendments, it typically, often when you see this JT, it's a joint, it goes through multiple committees, so it'll go to management committee. And actually, budget amendments, you'll have a roll call vote at the full council. So that will proceed non-consent. Is everyone in agreement with Number 2 going on consent. Councilmember Chambliss?
I'm sorry, this is kind of new as far as the movements from consent to non-consent. Can you repeat the reason for moving it to non-consent? I'm seeing it here in non-consent already.
No, not moving things from non-consent, but what goes to consent or non-consent to the council.
Oh, you just.
Yeah, so what we report on directly, or what will just go on the council's consent agenda versus non-consent agenda. So the budget item will be non-consent at council, at full council, and then it's the determinant of which of our items we want to be presented before the full council versus the ones that can be passed through in consent. And we just make that each committee makes those determinations. Yeah, all the ones that are on consent stay on consent.
Okay, so the reason, Madam Chair, this is considered non-consent as an amendment versus the other ones is, why is it not
For
consent?
the budget?
Yes, for the budget amendment.
All budget amendments. Number one is, so that will go, it'll go to management committee as well, and then it will go from there to full council. And at full council, because budget amendments require a roll call vote, it can't be on the consent agenda at council.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I would also add that typically those items that we put on consent are, even though they were in non-consent in the Transportation Committee, it's when there's a unanimous vote approving the item. If there's an opposing vote, they're in my experience always been put on non-consent to respect the opposing vote.
Agreed. I believe that's been the practice we've always had. And then we just make a decision of what you think needs to go in front of the full council. Sometimes it has to do with significance of issue, regional issues, significance of dollars, those types of things.
And Madam Chair, I'd add one more thing. And then at the full council meeting, people can move to pull things off of the consent and put it onto the non-consent if they disagree that it shouldn't be on that item. This is part of my past life, is why I know the details of this. And in the end, the chair can start the agenda wherever she wants, but they can be moved by motion during the full council meeting.
Madam Chair, well, as we're developing the agendas too, we'll look at items that are non-consent here as like items that might not be controversial at all, but they maybe are information we want to expand on with the presentation at this committee, that we thought, oh, this would be good information to talk about in more detail than having on the consent item. So different things for informational purposes.
And I think sometimes that's gauged by the level of discussion that happens at a committee sometimes too. If we have a lot of conversation about something in particular, it becomes pretty clear that maybe we want to have it on the non-consent agenda at council. It's that type of dynamic. But we make that determination, and then, like General Manager Koister said, we can, at the full council, can always get pulled off. Yep. So with that, does everyone agree that item number 2 can be put on the consent agenda at council? Councilmember Sterner.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I would prefer if that could just stay on the non-consent part of an agenda for the full council, because I think I could vet out some more.
All right, we can do that. All right, very well. Then the last item of business tonight is a motion to adjourn.
Actually, before that, can I just ask a question just back on
Of
the TOD piece? So, we don't have a lot of,
Yep, of course. We've got our experts in the audience.
We don't have a lot of land available, right? So, you look at this piece of land. So if someone would have come to us, let's say, and said, make the fact pattern a great one for us, right? So it's a minority-owned business. They're choosing to stay in Minnesota or move their 100 jobs to Atlanta, and they're looking to grow to 200 jobs. And we could have, let's say, given them the property for $100,000 and created 200 living wage jobs, maybe averaging $50,000, $60,000 a year. And there was a business like this, actually just moved into the Midway not long ago. So we would say we don't want that because we got somebody else that bid higher on a project. So it doesn't seem like we're sort of take a mindset of actually of really sort of promoting transit-oriented development and sort of encouraging job expansion and the kinds of jobs that we would like to have in our region. It doesn't seem like we're that strategic, I guess, in the way we're disposing of property.
Could you come up for just a quick moment? We can have a broader discussion about how we've
Yeah,
developed
but I
TOT.
just,
But I think, if Lucy can quickly answer your question, and, we can have you come back for a
and it may
broader
be how we've
discussion.
set the policy and the, what we've done to sort of handcuff you, so to speak, but that's what I'd be curious about.
Madam
Lucy.
Chair, council members, I'm Lucy Galbraith. I'm the Director of Transit-Oriented Development. And the council adopted a TOD policy most recently, January 2014, that gives us 4 goals. And we try to meet all 4 goals in all situations. In this case, and every single site is different as to what we do. The council, after intense discussion, we knew that we had an interested party out there. This isn't one of the most high market areas of town. It's zoned light industrial. It's very restricted in its use. And the decision was made to do an invitation for bids. We wrote in deed restrictions to protect transit. So it isn't just transit or just for the money. And one of the restrictions we have is that it can't hurt transit in any way. And so we kind of legal languaged it so to be sure that there would be ridership, that there wouldn't be interference with our transit, and that it wouldn't just sit empty, that it wouldn't have a land use that has no people in it. So we do try to meet all 4 goals each time, and the mechanism, the Snelling situation was extremely unusual. We had just had a market study that said that there was no market there. There wasn't enough market to put our land on, and the value, and the soccer stadium showed up. So it was determined that we could do a sole source there. But we follow all the council policies on procurement to determine which kind of thing to do. And in this case, the adjacent property at Les Gourmet, which is was a small business and has grown and outgrown itself a couple of times, wanted to expand here instead of moving to the suburbs. So we can find out how many jobs they're going to be. That's a really good question, actually. But I'm kind of going on and on. Wes is looking at me that I'm getting into the weeds. But TOD is kind of my thing. Anyway, so I think it's a really good question. I'd be happy to sit down with any council member and go through how we deal with the council policy on each site to be sure that we are meeting all the council's goals.
Madam Chair,
Yep,
actually my luck was, I think we should come back with the job numbers, that if we can get that from the purchaser. I think it's a good idea. It probably should be well taken, something we should incorporate into all our reviews. Sometimes we're restricted by federal dollars.
Yep. Councilmember Ferguson.
Well, like you look at what the Port Authority does, for example, right? They put covenants on the wage level of the job. Some of them are more or less enforceable. But just at least it has the council stating our purpose, right? We would like to see, better paying jobs with benefits, et cetera, as opposed to, and that may very well be what's going on here. We don't know, right? But that would just be sort of some of that information as we think about it, because I suspect we will have some land in Hopkins coming up for sale fairly soon. And it would be useful, I think, for us to be much more intentional about how we think about that, how we maybe leverage that into attracting a great company for Hopkins, and how we be a little bit more purposeful around. So that'd be given the policy is 4 or 5 years old, it may be time to take a look at it again. So.
Always happy to do a refresh.
Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to say, I think a presentation of the entire council would be really, really beneficial. And I agree with Councilmember Ferguson that maybe looking at this and having a deeper understanding, and the time that has passed, maybe things have changed or can be fine-tuned. But
Yep. Thank you,
Madam
Lucy.
Chair and council members, I'm certainly always open to revising and reviewing. I will note that we always work with the partner jurisdictions, in this case, the city of Minneapolis. And in the case of the Port Authority, they were involved in the Snelling deal quite heavily. And so we knew that there were going to be a number of requirements in terms of small and local businesses imposed by the city in that deal. And we want to be careful that we aren't stepping into a city role when we know that our partners in the city are going to do various things. So I just want to raise that small thing that we always work with our partner jurisdictions, and we do want to be sure that we're being the council and not the city in these.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Lucy. And I'll pass the message along to the chair that perhaps it'd be a good topic for a committee of the whole where we can have a little more discussion. All right, anything else? All right, now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned.